Well, hello, boys and girls. It's Mr. Henderson here. Time for another edition of Mr. Henderson Teaches You Romeo and Juliet through e-learning because we're separated, because we have to be. If you didn't hear the news, unfortunately, we are not returning to school until at least May 1st. So we're going to be doing this for a while for now. So today, your assignment is to take a look at the prologue for Romeo and Juliet. Now, if you're not sure what a prologue is, it's kind of a speech that somebody before the play would come out on stage and make directed at the audience prior to the play happening. And usually in a prologue, you're going to give some form of like a setup to what the story is going to be about. So one thing that makes the prologue in Romeo and Juliet so significant, and part of what you're going to read about today, is Shakespeare does an interesting thing where he straight up gives you a spoiler alert prior to this play happening. And if you think about modern day stories, if they were to tell you before the story or the movie or whatever, like, hey, here's what's going to happen, you'd be like, excuse me, spoilers, right? Think about when the Avengers came out and there was this big concentrated effort to avoid spoilers. Shakespeare wasn't about that, at least in this play. He straight up came out and said, hey, here's what's going to happen in my play. And it's kind of interesting that he does that because as a result, what winds up happening is you kind of get sucked into the journey itself to how the ending happens versus this thought process of, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? We already know what's going to happen. So for that reason is why I have chosen the classic game, Super Mario Brothers, made in 1985. By the way, for reference, I was born in 1986. So for me, this is actually one of the first video games I have memory of really playing as a child. And I've chosen this game to talk about the prologue because if you ever played Mario games before, the ending of the story isn't really what's important because we pretty much know how Mario games are going to end. There's an evil force, and at the end of it, Mario's going to defeat it. In the case of the original Super Mario Brothers, he was trying to find the Princess Peach, save her from Bowser, and eventually, if you beat all the levels, he does it. That's not what's important. It's the journey to get there that is important. So let's cue up a one-player game here as we attempt to talk about our prologue a little bit and how Shakespeare and why Shakespeare is going to spoil the story for you. So he comes out and he says, there's two families both liking dignity. So we talked about last week the Capulets and the Montagues and how both of these families are very well respected. That's what the indignity talks about. As I got hit by a Goomba. Great job, Mr. Henderson. But let me take a shortcut into a pipe. So both these families are like in dignity, and it talks about in Verona where we lay our scene. So Verona, that is in Italy, which is kind of weird when you consider Shakespeare was in England, but in fair Verona we lay our scene. So it talks about ancient grudge brings new mutiny. Mutiny is like a revolt. And we talked about the prince last week and how he's tired of everyone just fighting in the community. And civil blood makes civil hands unclean. As we said, lots of fighting going on. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes. So we know we have these two warring families going against each other. But this is the main... as I lose my mushroom. But the main point that's going to come up here, and kind of the key point, if you catch nothing else in this prologue, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their lives. Now, Star-crossed kind of just means unfortunate, unlucky. That's just how it goes. So I'm trying not to die. Take that, Goombas. Um, but it's kind of significant. He comes out and says, "Hey, Romeo and Juliet, they're going to die. They're going to take their lives at the end of this play." And see that mushroom? Let's actually do a one up. No, don't want to die. So he comes out and he says, "Hey, at the end of this play, Romeo and Juliet are going to take their lives." And that's kind of like a massive spoiler alert if you think about it, right? Like, we're going to go through the quote unquote greatest love story ever told. And he's telling us up front, hey, these two characters that I want you to get like super invested in, and I want you to root for, and I want you to think they're going to make it. They're gonna take their lives at the end of this, and it's kind of one of these things that I've thought about throughout the years, where I go, well, why does Shakespeare do this? Why does Shakespeare tell us up front that Romeo and Juliet are going to take their as I die? Great job. See, just like Romeo and Juliet, I just died because I missed my jump. But why does he do this? What would happen in this play from an audience perspective if he were to just go, you know what, I'm not going to tell you the ending. I'm not going to tell you that at the end of this, both of these characters are going to die. And I think the big thing that we wind up talking about a lot here is there's a sense of dramatic irony. If you recall, throughout first 9 weeks, we talked a lot about dramatic irony. That's where we know something that the characters don't. So throughout this entire play, we know Romeo and Juliet are going to die. That's just a thing that's going to happen. Obviously, they don't know that. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in this play as characters. So it adds this sense of dread to the audience throughout, knowing that each action that they're going to take is ultimately something that is going to lead to their downfall. And if we didn't know up front that was going to happen, we wouldn't have that sense of dread. Shakespeare does a couple other nice things for us here, as that wasn't great. He does a couple other very nice things for us. He tells us how long the play is going to be. The play is going to be a couple hours. Take that, Bowser. Play is going to be a couple of hours. He says at the end of this that the death of Romeo and Juliet is going to bring peace to the parents. But again, it's not so much the ending that we go, well, gee, why'd you play? It's the journey that's going to get us to this ending. And so one thing we are going to talk about throughout this play is, the fact that we know they're going to die. How does that impact us as a reader and as an audience member? Knowing that this is going to happen at the end. So please go on your Nearpod and please read through the prologue for yourself. Obviously, it's in some Shakespearean language, but after that, there are a couple questions that I would like you to answer. And please get that submitted to us, and that's going to be checked by Friday. If you have further questions, please send me a message on Edsby, or you can join me on Zoom for my live office hours. That is from 9:30 until 10, and the meeting ID for that is on your Edsby. So until next time, I hope you've enjoyed this, and take care.